Om Sahana Vadu Sahana Bhunatu Saharim Karavavare Tejasvinavadhidamastu Ma Vidyushamare Om Shanti Shanti. So we'll continue the discussion. Different aspects of Vedanta philosophy and Vedantic way of life. So during the last 2-3 days, we were discussing the expositions of the highest reality through conversations and direct expositions. Now, today we are going to take up another aspect of Vedantic way of life. You'll be surprised to know that in ancient times, there used to be dialogues, conversations, exchange of ideas among scholars, sometimes hundreds, maybe thousands of them, who used to assemble in courts. Kings and emperors used to invite scholars and saints and sages from all over Indian subcontinent, which at that time included today's Afghanistan, some parts of Central Asia, all the way to today's Burma. So scholars used to come and assemble and discuss profound spiritual subjects. We are going to take up one of a very interesting dialogue. In fact, most of the important dialogues appear in the two well-known Upanishads, the largest of the two. One is Brihadaranyaka and Chandogya. These are two famous Upanishads, which are fairly big. Brihadaranyaka is the biggest of the Upanishadic texts. There are innumerable dialogues. Some dialogues are between husband and wife. You'll be surprised. One of the most profound spiritual truths in the Vedantic tradition was expounded in the course of a conversation between a husband and his wife. Both were equally philosophical. Both were equally enlightened. One Maitreyi was the wife of Yajnavalkya, who was a great teacher of those days. In fact, some of the very subtle spiritual truths. To give an example, Yajnavalkya in his conversation with Maitreyi says in one context, we all do things because we love our own self. It is not selfishness. Take an example. Suppose a mother loves her child. Now, what for is she loving her child? In a way, it is for her own sake. It may appear to be a bit difficult to understand, maybe even ridiculous. It is for her own self that she loves her husband. Why? Because here self is not a small self. The self with a capital letter. Yes, the universal self. In a way, from a psychological angle, this idea has been expounded in some of the tikas. You know why a mother feeds her child or loves her child? Because by doing that, she gets a kind of blissful feeling. It is for this experience that a mother feeds or loves her child. Of course, that love itself is manifesting in the form of an inner feeling of fulfillment or blissfulness that she experiences when she sees her child being well fed. So that experience gives her a kind of joy. It is not a joy, blissfulness, which is one aspect of Atman. Satchit Ananda. Ananda is blissfulness. So just again, in the same dialogue, Yajnavalkya says, Atma va are srotavyaha mandavyaha nididhyasitavyaha. You have to hear learn about this spiritual truth, Atman, then you have to contemplate, meditate on its essence, and then you have to deeply go into its essence and become one with it. You should make it your own experience. Such profound truths are discussed in a dialogue between a husband and his wife. Here we are going to take up another dialogue which took place in the court of a great emperor of those times. His name was Janaka. Hundreds of scholars and philosophers have assembled, and Yajnavalkya was the greatest of them. Now, when Yajnavalkya comes to the court, after some time, Janaka puts him one question. The question by itself may appear to be very, very crude or maybe primitive. See, during that time, how do we go about? How does a man sit, go about doing his work, and return to his place? Simple question. And Yajnavalkya replies by sunlight. Janaka asks the next question. Suppose sun is set in the west in the evening. There is no sunlight. How does a man go about, or a woman for the matter, go about doing his or her work, doing different duties, responsibilities, traveling and so on? By moonlight. Suppose there is no moonlight and sun is set in the west, then perhaps you may light a fire, a candle. So fire. But suppose there is no sunlight, no moonlight, there is no fire, candlelight or anything, and it is in pitch darkness. How do you know that a car is moving in the street? Or a boat is moving in Lake Tahoe? You hear. But suppose you are, for some reason, let's say, you are dumb, you can't hear anything. You can't see because it's pitch darkness, no sunlight, no moonlight, not even a candle or a fire. And you can't hear anything. Then, how do you remember things? Knowledge is not totally absent when you can't see, hear, or smell. Knowledge is not absent. We sit and we meditate. See, look at Newton. If the mythology is true, Newton sit under a tree, apple tree, and the apple fell on his head. He must have closed his eyes. Nothing visible. He may not have heard anything because he was a man of deep contemplation. He may not have even heard the apple falling on his head. Of course, in many cases, even a coconut falls on our head, it may break our skull, and no truth may come out of it. But in Newton's case, you find he was so fully focused, so fully concentrated, that a great truth came out of him. Now, the discussion continues like this. Where is the source of knowledge? Knowledge is designated as light in this particular dialogue. I shall read out the dialogue, then I shall continue the exposition. What is light? Light is not something that we just see. Light is the source of knowledge. And how does light become the source of knowledge? Light has got two characteristics. Light can reveal itself, and light can reveal other things. This chair has to be revealed by light. But the light can reveal itself, and it can reveal other things. So light here means revealer, something in whose presence things get revealed, things get known. So what is the real source of knowledge? Suppose a man dies, sunlight is there, he can't see anything, he can't know anything. He can hear if he were alive, but he's dead, so he can't hear. He can't hear and he can't smell, he can't do anything. So there is a light within us, a light which is the light of lights. The Upanishad is called Jyotisham Jyoti. He means the light behind all lights. That light is called Atma Jyoti, the light of Atman. The light from which all other revealers like sunlight or moonlight or fire, they all borrow light from this supreme light, the light of Atman. So here, from a simple dialogue, the highest metaphysical truth is revealed. I shall read out, then I shall continue the discussion. It takes a few minutes. So Yajnavalkya comes to the court of Janaka. Here, both are equally great philosophers. The purpose is to take you, to lead you, taking you by the hand, from the grossest, for the simplest, apparently from a very crude idea of sunlight revealing things in daytime or sunlight helping us to go about doing our things. From that, the real principle of light, the real essence of light is expounded. And what is that light? Light is Atman. Actually, in the whole world, there is only one light, that is Atman. All other lights are borrowing light from this Atman. As I said, the characteristic of light is that it reveals other things and reveals itself. So, who is the revealer of all things in the world? Atman. So, Atman is here expounded as the light of all lights, the essence of everything. So, dialogue is something like this. Yajnavalkya kim jyotirayam purusha iti aditya jyotihi samrat iti hovacha adityenaiva ayam jyotishaste palyade karma gurude vipalyate iti evamedaitam Yajnavalkya. So, I have already said kim jyotirayam purusha means with what light is a human being equipped, which enables him to go about, to walk, to sit and do his work and return to his place. Sunlight. Then Janaka continues the question. Astamide aditya Yajnavalkya kim jyotirayam purusha iti chandrama evasya jyotir bhavati iti Chandramasa evayam jyotishaste palyayate karma gurude vipalyate iti. So, when sunlight, there is no sunlight, moonlight helps us to do things. Astamide aditya Yajnavalkya chandramasi astamide kim jyotirayam purusha iti. What's the light that enables us to live in this world, to do things? Well, it is fire. Agni jyoti. Astamide aditya Yajnavalkya chandramasi astamide shanti agno shantayam vachi kim jyotirayam purusha iti. Okay, the fourth one is that I have already mentioned, Vak Jyoti, Jyoti or light in the form of speech or noise. As I said earlier, suppose you are sitting in a dark room, you can't see anything, your eyes are closed, you are dumb, you can't hear anything at that time, and there is no fire either, no Agni Jyoti, then you may hear perhaps. Suppose there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no fire, then if you can hear, if you are not dumb, if you can hear, then you come to know of the existence of a car traveling the road because of the noise that comes from that vehicle. So Vak Jyoti, light in the form of speech, noise, which is a revealer. You come to know of the existence of that vehicle that's moving the street. Suppose there is no sunlight, no moonlight, and no fire, and you are dumb, you can't hear. You sit, you meditate, And perhaps some of the greatest truths are revealed in meditation. Even in scientists, you may have read about it. Many great scientists. Maybe these days, when everything could be stored in a machine, the higher intuitive power of the mind may not be put to much use. When you can put everything in a machine, a scientist can go and get fully drunk, and next day morning he can open the computer. So whatever he has contemplated, whatever he has discovered is already stored, so he can continue his research. But Newton did not have that luxury. He has to chase his idea. In early days, scientists had to become rishis, sages. All great scientists, Darwin for example, Darwin's life is a classic example. Newton's life is a classic example. They were all really sages because they had to chase their idea. They had to contemplate their idea, they had to meditate on the idea. And as they meditated, as they went deeper and deeper, suddenly a flash came out. That's how great discoveries took place. So, there was no sunlight that revealed the truth for them. No moonlight, no fire, no speech, but maybe they may have done a lot of research, put all their ideas in their mind, contemplating, thinking, and then gone to sleep. Next day morning, some of them woke up with a solution to the problem. Where did the solution come from? From within, from this light. So, here, even we can find that even if there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no fire and no speech, still when we sit and close our eyes, a lot of things are revealed within. And remember, the source of that revelation is not sunlight, not moonlight. The source of the revelation is from within. That is Atma Jyoti. Really speaking, without this Atma Jyoti, other things cannot be revealed. According to Vedanta, the light doesn't reveal anything. Sunlight, moonlight. Light only removes darkness. To give you the classical example from Vedanta, suppose there is a piece of rope lying on the table. There is not enough light, only dim light. And all the windows and doors are not open. Some of them are open. So there is not enough light. You mistake the rope for the snake. It's a very ancient imagery, but it's very classical, very effective. So you may perhaps mistake that rope for a snake because its shape, the way it lies on the table, it is somewhat curved. So you may interpret its one end of the rope as a head of a snake, the other end as a tail, and the middle portion of the rope as the body of the snake. So you may mistake the rope for the snake. Same is a mistake. Then you open all the doors and windows, or you switch on the light. Suddenly you realize, oh, it is really a piece of rope. Now what was the role of light here? This external light. This is not Atma Jyoti. It's a light that flooded into the room when you opened the windows or when you switched on the electric switch. So that light did not actually reveal the rope. That light removed the darkness that remained in that room, which led to the wrong notion in your mind that it was not a rope but a snake. This is a wrong notion. If the rope was the result of light, then it cannot be really true. The fact that it is a rope is not dependent upon the presence of light. The fact that it is a rope is dependent upon itself, on the fact that it is a rope and not a snake. So, the role of the light was confined and very limited. What was it? Removing the darkness. Once darkness is removed, the reality is self-revealed. Now, Yajnavalkya says, This light is not an extraneous light. It is not coming from any external source. That light comes from within. It is this light that enables us to do everything in this world. And when this light is realized, then we realize that this light is present within us, and also it is present everywhere. It is immanent and also transcendental. So you can see the ancient Vedantic approach. The mountains, the trees, lakes and sunlight and moonlight and fire, all these things are used as imageries, illustrations in the parable, through which a profound spiritual truth is expounded. And what's the truth? The truth is the essence of knowledge, the real Jyoti or light is coming from within. It is residing within. It doesn't come from without. The sun borrows its ability to reveal things from this Atma Jyoti, the light of Atman. The moon gets its light from this light of Atman. So also the fire. And words get their ability to reveal things from this Atma Jyoti. Because this Atma Jyoti cannot be explained. It cannot be defined. It is beyond definition. Anything that could be defined is limited. As you may listen to Swamiji's lectures that day we explained. Anything that is known is unreal in Vedanta. Unreal in the sense it is not absolutely real. It may be paradoxical. What you know is unreal. Because the absolute reality cannot be known. Then what about what you know? What you know is only relative. It is not absolutely unreal, but it is not absolutely real. This Atman is within. It is the most intimate. It is the nearest thing to us. But so it cannot be known. What is known is something that goes objectification and verbalization. I shall explain this process. Objectification means something becomes object of knowledge. In the sense, something that becomes object of perception. Perception means mind and any or all of the five senses of perception coming together, and through the process you come to know something. See, when my eye and mind go together, I perceive the lake. When my sense of hearing, my ears and mind come together, I hear the vehicle moving in the street. So also, the sense of smell and mind coming together, you come to know of certain things through smelling. Like that, touching and tasting and so on. So whatever we know in the relative world is objectified. Means in the sense, we become the subject and we come to know of this object through or with the help of mind and any or all of the five senses of perception. And so we call it, give it a name. It's called verbalization. In Vedantic tradition, there are five conditions of verbalization. To know things, to define things, to name things. Pancha, Shabda, Pravritti it is called. Means five types of functions of speech or words. How do we explain things? See, if somebody asks you, what is sun? You cannot really explain what sun is in the ordinary sense. Maybe physicists may do, but in the ordinary conversation. Somebody asks you, what is it like? You can say it is like sun. Then no sensible person will ask you, what is sun? Because it's obvious. It is called Drivya. It is obvious. This is one way of explaining things. You may, suppose you see something very strange, which you have not seen earlier. And somebody asks you, what is it like? You may, it's like sun. The conversation ends. That's enough explanation. You may ask, who is that person? You may say, he's my father, he's my brother, and so on. So their relationship is implied. Sambandha it is called. So one is dravya. If you want to know of certain things and somebody tells you it's like sun, you don't ask for more explanation, because pratyaksha siddha means it is obvious, it is well known what sun is like. But other is not well known. Who is that person? You came with a stranger. Your friend asks you, who is he? You may tell him, he is my brother. So a relationship is implied to explain or define the stranger. Or you may tell him, well, he is a software engineer. Then you know his profession, his activities in which he is engaged normally is implied. Which means you are trying to define and explain him in the context of some work he does, which is called karma. So dravya, karma, sambandha. Then you may ask, what is that creature? It's an insect. So a species is explained. So you may explain many of these things with the help of something obvious like the sun, or some work that he does, or some relationship, or some quality. It's a red flower, white flower, and so on. Redness or whiteness is a guna or a quality or attribute. So these are the ways in which you try to explain, define anything in this world which is subject to objectification, which means that we come to know with the help of eyes and or ears, sense of touch, sense of smell or sense of taste, and mind. If mind is absent, it cannot take place. Because this Atma Jyoti reflects through mind. Actually, mind is borrowing its light from Atma Jyoti. Mind reflects this light from Atman. So mind becomes equipped to reveal, understand and explain things. And when the mind is combined with any of the sense of perception, you come to know things. Vedanta says, whatever you pursue in this way cannot be absolutely real. Because whatever the mind perceives is relative. Please remember, it is not totally unreal, but it is not absolutely real. One great blunder that took place during the East-West conversations or dialogues that took place in the later half of 18th century between European Orientalists and Upanishad philosophy. Very serious blunder which Swami Vivekananda incidentally pointed out in his London lectures in 1896. That is, the word mithya or maya was translated as illusion. It was a very serious blunder, which you find in later works. Many of the great scholars and translators tried to correct. But the first great teacher who pointed out this great blunder was Vivekananda, who in his Jnana Yoga lectures in London in 1896 pointed out that the word mithya or maya should and can never be translated as illusion. Because illusion is something that appears which has no background, which is totally unreal. Optical illusion, you hear something which there is no sound coming anyway. So whatever is objectified, verbalized, perceived at the mental or intellectual level with the help of the different senses of perception is not absolutely real. It is only relative. It belongs to this world. It is empirical. It is phenomenal. Now, what about this Atma Jyoti? So, in the commentary, Shankaracharya and later Advaitin commentators, they say This Atma Jyoti, this Atman cannot be defined. It cannot be perceived. At the same time, it is not remote. It is not distant, because this Atman is our own real near self, our most intimate reality is this Atman. At the same time, it cannot be explained. So it is called this Sakshat Aparokshat Brahma. It's sometimes called, it is non-intimate, non-distant. That's the only way we can say. It is not distant. So when you talk about, say, Iceland or Alaska or Siberia, it is a distant, remote place. You may not have gone there. You are referring to something which is remote in terms of perception, distance, and also ideation. But when you talk about something very close to you, which you have seen, like dog or whatever maybe, or the chair in front of you, which is near to you, which you perceive. So it is very near to you, you perceive that. The other one is so far, you don't perceive it. So what is far is called remote, paroksha. What is very near to you, that you perceive, that you use, that you see with your eyes, is called pratyaksha. It is very near to you. Atman is neither remote nor near. In the sense, Atman cannot be perceived. So it is not pratyaksha. Whatever pratyaksha means, anything that you can see with your eyes, that comes within the purview of the realm of your vision. That is called pratyaksha. Aksha means eyes. So whatever is obvious to you, near to you, is something that you can define or explain. Whatever is far, you cannot explain, because you have not seen Alaska or Siberia. But Atman is not so far like Siberia. Atman is our own reality. We are the Atman within ourselves, but we cannot explain it. So it is called Aparoksha. In the sense, it is your nearest, dearest, and most intimate neighbor, because we are itself. And this Atman is the source of all knowledge. All other methods of knowledge, all tools of epistemology, the direct perception, inference, comparison, analogy, presumption or negation, all pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, sabda, arthavati, anupalabdhi, all these different tools of epistemology, or Aristotelian perception, is much smaller. The list is very short. Now, all these come within the realm of what we see at the relative plane. And Yajnavalkya says, this Atma Jyoti is within us. And once we try to trace the source of what we know, what we perceive, and going backward and reach the original source, then we become spiritually enlightened. This is a wonderful dialogue in Vedantic Upanishad. Now, the Ishavasya Upanishad, from another angle, explains what happens when you realize this inner Jyoti. What happens when you realize this revealer of all revealers within yourself. The Ishavasya is one of the earlier Upanishads, It is very short. It gives a very interesting description of not only the highest spiritual truth, but also how to practice this highest truth in our life. What you call Vedantic Way of Life is expounded in the Ishavasya. So first I shall try to link Jyoti Brahmanam, as it is called in Vedantika, with some of these important verses in the Ishavasya Upanishad. In the 6th verse it is said, Yastu sarvani bhudani atmani eva anupashyati sarva bhudeshu cha atmanam tato na vijigupsati. He who sees all beings within his own self, this Atma Jyoti, and he who feels the presence of this Jyoti this light of all lights in all beings in this world, that person becomes a universal man or woman for the matter. He feels no hatred towards anybody. He becomes universal. Because he realizes the presence of this reality within himself and the presence of this reality within all other living beings. You know, a few funny incidents took place when I tried to expound this, not here but outside California, when I explained the universal truth. Then maybe to make fun of this philosophy, it is a possibility with that intention. Somebody asked, in that case, what about these criminals, Genghis Khan, Hitler, all these wonderful human beings, they had Atman within. So why they didn't, they had all the Atman within. Buddha, Christ, Shankara, Ramakrishna, they had Atman within. The scourges of humanity also had this Atman Jyoti within. So we should respect them all, accept them all, because everything is Atman. So here this statement is there. He who experiences the presence is Atman in all living beings, he becomes so broad-minded, he respects, he tolerates all. So this is the question. Now the point is this. Wickedness or evil is only at the intellectual, at the body, mind, complex level. We cannot go and bring a tiger to attend this retreat or if a bear which are moving in the streets. We cannot do that. The Atman is there in them also. The point is, the only difference is, once we realize the supreme truth, we may act against the evil or evil persons, but our mind will not be colored by obsessive hatred towards anything. We do not become imbeciles without reacting or resisting evil. We do that. But even by doing that, we do not become fanatics. We do not become fanatical, monstrous, cruel beings. Because in the midst of all this, you find, they realize there is reality within. You find in the life of Sri Krishna, for example. Sri Krishna played multi-role. He was a soldier, statesman, diplomat, kingmaker, emperor, and so on. A cowherd, and many roles he played. He was the friend of anybody who tried to seek God anywhere. He was a friend of aged housewife who were totally deprived of any help. He came to the help of Kunti. He came to the help of Gandhari. Wherever poor, humble, helpless women or old men were in need of help, Krishna comes to them as a great savior, helper, and assistant to help them. But he also thrashed the wicked beings. He did not make friends with Kamsa, or he was not a great friend of all the wicked monsters who were torturing or tormenting innocent, helpless people. He punished them. But after that, he never had any hatred for them. So what's the real benefit of knowing this knowledge? We may have to act in this world, we may have to work in this world. We may vote against the wrong candidate in an election, but we won't hate him for that reason. We won't vote for the wrong person because there is Atman within him also. No, we don't do that. But we may vote against him but won't hate him. So that's a subtle difference. Those who do not know this truth, they become filled with obsessive hatred, they become slaves of hostility. So psychopaths and all that. But those who know this wisdom, this wisdom is within them. Sri Ramakrishna says, keep the highest spiritual knowledge Of course, in those days, people used to wear dhoti. He said in a dhoti. We can say put in our pocket in modern times. And work in the world. That was Sri Ramakrishna's suggestion. Keep this truth. At the same time, don't forget this. And this knowledge helps us to avoid being fanatics or being obsessed with hatred or hostility. That's why in the next verse, the same Upanishad says, Yasmin sarvani bhudani atmaiva bhut vijanantha tasya ko moha kashoka egattum anupashyata. So, those who realize the supreme truth and those who realize that this Atman has become the very self. All living beings in this world have become this Atman, this very self. That person will be free from delusion, sorrow and so on. We may act, but act without sorrow, without fanaticism. In fact, this Upanishad at the very beginning expounds two profound truths. One, the highest philosophical doctrine, the other, the method to practice it. The highest philosophical truth is expounded. Ishavasim idam sarvam yat kinja jagatyam jagattena tyaktena bunjithaha ma grudha kasya siddharam. That's the first mantra of this Upanishad. So, it says, yes. So, whatever in this world moves, whatever exists in this world, it should be covered by the Lord. It means the Lord is omnipresent, present everywhere, in everything. And then the second verse says, Tena tyaktena bunjithaga ma krudha kasya siddhanam. Therefore, we can live in this world, enjoy this world, but enjoy this world not through enjoyment. Enjoy this world through renunciation. How can we enjoy this world through renunciation? By understanding the limitations, the perishable nature of what we enjoy. In fact, the difference between a spiritually enlightened person and his opposite is this. A spiritually enlightened person also does his or her work in this world. I can give many examples. Some of the classic illustrations in the Mahabharata, some of the greatest sages and saints, where men and women who led very, very ordinary life. One housewife who taught an ascetic, the highest spiritual truth, comes in the Vyadha Gita, and Vyadha himself was a great exponent of Vedanta philosophy, was a butcher by profession. Not a priest doing worship in a temple, but a butcher by profession. By doing that work and concentrating in doing that work to the utmost of his perfection, without any attachment, he became spiritually enlightened. And his teachings form the essence of the well-known work Vyadha Gita. So here, Tena Tyaktena Bunjitha. Therefore, you enjoy this world through renunciation. Mentally, you understand the perishable nature, the ephemeral nature of all these things that we make use of. At the same time, don't be obsessed or attached or don't be enslaved by this. And that helps you to remain active, but at the same time, non-attached. The next verse is also very interesting. Kurvanne hayakarmani jiji visheshatam samaha evam tvai nyannade dosti na karma lipyade nare. The point is that you should live in this world and try to live in this world for 100 years. That's the statement. Be active, be dynamic, do your duty and live for 100 years. Enjoy. While enjoying, don't forget that what you are going to enjoy is not something eternal. There is something beyond that. In fact, once we understand the limitation of anything, we won't be enslaved by this. That is psychological fact. We become enslaved, we become obsessed with something only when we forget for a moment that what we are going to enjoy, what we are trying to acquire will bring eternal happiness. Even intellectually we all know the money won't bring everything. Even children can intellectually understand that wealth cannot make you happy forever. Everyone knows. You don't need to be you don't have to be a philosopher. But what happens is, for the moment, at the time of trying to accumulate wealth by whatever means, we become attached because we forget at that time, for a moment we forget that it is not eternal. Without becoming forgetful of that, at that moment, we won't go out of the way to acquire wealth and thereby invite depression and other problems. So that's why the Upanishad says, Tena Tyaktena Munchitaha. The Upanishad gives a very balanced, systematic, healthy philosophy of life. This can be practiced by anyone. It is not a religious philosophy, it's a philosophy of human existence, human life. It is religious in the sense it comes in the Upanishads, part of Hindu tradition, but it is so universal, it is not a religious doctrine in that sense. It's a great spiritual ideal. See, kurvanneva iha karmani jiji shatam samaka. Try to live, aspire to live for 100 years, working hard, and being engaged in your duties and responsibilities. But how should we live? Tyaktena bunchitaha. Even while enjoying the things of this world, we should remember that they are perishable, they are not eternal. This piece of wisdom enables us to fight some of the problems. All psychological problems are rooted in one fact, that for the moment we forget it. Intellectually we know, everyone knows, but again we forget. That forgetfulness again is not deliberate. And this Upanishad, interestingly, concludes a very, very famous statement, and that is a very unique statement. It deals with human existence and death. How does a person who has led such a healthy life, spiritually healthy, balanced life, how does he meet his death? Vayu ranilam amurdamidam pasmantam Shariram Om Kradosmara Kradamsmara Kradosmara Kradamsmara. The meaning is this. I won't expound the whole philosophy, but the one point I want to remember. The person who has led a very happy, healthy, balanced way of life based on Vedantic principles, he is requesting his own mind, he is pleading his own mind. Oh mind, remember all the good things that I have done. All the good things that I have done. This body will be reduced to ashes. Everything will vanish. All the wealth, all the material splendor, all that accumulated will come to an end. In fact, this is wisdom. So, for such a person, even death is not a fearsome monster, not a terrifying spectacle. It is a friend rather. A philosophy of life, Vedantic way of life, an exposition of it will be incomplete without expounding Vedantic concept of death. So, it's very interesting. I shall continue this discussion later in classes. The person is pleading his own mind. Oh mind, now you have already led a full life. Try to remember the good things you have done, the good thoughts you have thought, the good deeds I have done, because whatever I have done will be stored in the form of impressions and memories in mind. So he is pleading his mind to go back to those good memories, refreshing memories, memories that console you, so that he will get the feeling, well, I have lived a useful, meaningful life. So that's why I said, Vedantic way of life is so profound and so complete and balanced. Life itself becomes very meaningful, and it becomes a very pleasant journey towards a higher spiritual destination. It becomes a very pleasant, enjoyable journey. It is not a flight from realities, not running away from unpleasant, fearsome realities. You don't have to worry or fear some terrible thing that is going to happen to you. There is no hellfire burning at all. So, I will come to this subject in the next class. The person is trying to make his mind go back to the wonderful days, remember the wonderful deeds, wonderful thoughts that it had thought and done in the past, so that he will have a future. Because the future, through transmigration, he will continue his pilgrimage, his life journey. But how he is going to continue the journey in the next life depends upon what all thought currents, what all ideas he had in his mind at the time of breathing the last, leaving his body behind. So the person is asking, oh mind, please remember. So Kritam smara, Kritosmara, Kritam smara, Kritosmara. Mind, remember, try to go back, recollect the great pilgrimages I have made, what all help I have done to others, what all I have done that gave me the feeling, oh, I have led a meaningful life. That is the greatness of this Upanishad. We will continue this discussion the next tomorrow. No, we will have introduction. We have, yes, 30 minutes.
Is fanaticism the other side of the coin from an obsessive hatred?
Yeah, once we at least intellectually understand that God lives within all of them, then it doesn't become a sickening, a self-destructive hatred. That's one advantage. It should not make us inactive or imbecile or passive against evil. Or you find we have something very interesting. And Mahabharata and Vedas are full of lives, biographies of great saints and sages who came to help people everywhere. And not only through advice, even by assisting helpless people in overcoming monsters, evil men and women who try to harm. So, sometimes when you read this, it is a very simple doubt that could occur in our mind. Does Vedanta make you passive? In fact, it did make Indians passive for some centuries. So that's one of the themes of Swami Vivekananda's Indian speeches, which he delivered in India. So Vivekananda traces Indian history. So India is supposed to have had 19 centuries of golden era. But then what happened during the later centuries, maybe for 300, 400 years, what really happened, the great Vedantic truths were completely forgotten, and people were fed with the mythological stories. Mythological stories are only meant to explain some of the higher spiritual Vedantic truths, but wherever they contradicted, they should be rejected. This is the normal belief, the tradition. But then what happened in many places, people started interpreting spirituality as inaction, passivity. They started interpreting poverty as asceticism. inaction as non-violence. So it happened. So that's why if you interpret spirituality as exclusive inaction or passivity, there is a great danger. After some time somebody may rise and he will preach extreme violence. Unless you give a balanced philosophy, if it tilts in one direction completely, then the pendulum will strike back from the other end after some time. This happens, and that's what Toynbee calls challenge and response mechanism in historical events. You always find throughout history, after Jaina religion was a magnificent, great spiritual ideal. Bertrand Russell, in his book Why I Am Not a Christian, a famous book, he says Jainism is only genuine religion because it tells you should not kill a mosquito, you should not do harm to a fly or an insect. But can anyone live in this world that way? So they closed all their mouth, but they charge the highest profit rates. They are cutthroat businessmen in India, experts, efficient, very effective, but then they practice highest non-violence. So sometimes, any kind of extremist idealism, either based on violence or passivity, can indirectly prompt a reaction from the other end. That's what really happened. See, Buddhism had this problem in India. See, for 200 years, millions of people turned to Buddhism and they became mendicants, statesmen, soldiers, businessmen, all became mendicants. It happened in India with disastrous consequences. Those who were not really fit to become mendicants became mendicants as a profession. So very often, this could prompt a reaction from the other end of the pendulum, which could be equally destructive. That's why Vedanta is very balanced. Very balanced. Buddha was trying to attempt to bring out this balanced Madhyapantha, the middle path. But after some centuries, again, it underwent a complete transformation. And this happened in all traditions. After some centuries, not immediately, after some centuries, the original teachings of the great prophets, the founders of religion, took a new turn, prompting a negative reaction from the other end of the pendulum. That's what really happens.
And the way to avoid it then is non-sycophancy and healthy dissent.
Yes, very balanced outlook. See, for example, here, the perishable nature of empirical worldly pleasures is emphasized. But it doesn't mean that all of you should go to a forest and sit and meditate. No. Keeping that in mind, you live in this world. So that will help you when your mind tells, well, I want money at any cost. And then say this money is not going to last for long. This counter philosophy will give a balanced outlook. That is the essence of Vedanta. So, that's it.
If the inherent Jyoti is in everybody, right? How does this covering of darkness and ignorance creeps in?
Now,
Swami, could you repeat the questions?
I shall repeat. If if this Jyoti, this light of light, is already present in all of us, then how is it that we are not always aware of it? How does this cover? How does it get concealed? Why do we become unaware of it? So the answer is any selfish act and any wrong thought, idea, all these can create a veil of ignorance. As we practice purity of life, purity of action, everything more and more, this mirror becomes clearer and cleaner. You can find this happening in our life. You look at the, I've observed people, I can tell them, people who continuously do unselfish deeds, who are engaged in meditation, slowly you find what we normally understand by spirituality begins to manifest more and more. The more we engage in the opposite type of activities, the more and more it gets concealed. It's like a mirror. See, this Jyoti reflects in our mind and buddhi, intellect and mind. We also sometimes feel mentally at peace, relaxed, when we do something noble. Anyone can test this psychologically. You do something, a good deed to help somebody without any selfish motive. You feel a feeling of lightness within. A kind of, why these great billionaires, why they start foundations to fight AIDS or Ebola in Africa, to support education programs in backward nations. Why they do that? They are badly in need of this, because they accumulated huge amounts of money in the bank. So, though they are well dressed, they look magnificent, but everything within is covered, thick veil of covering. So when they do some philanthropical deeds, even with the huge splashing headlines, newspapers, still that helps them. We get feeling of relaxation. Of course, this is a beginning. It is only the kindergarten of spiritual life. But then it's a beginning. That's why the mind urges you to do something. You're badly in need of some mental medicine, tonic, that gives you feeling of inner fulfillment, relief. That's why they are doing it. And once they get engaged in this noble activities more and more, even with a selfish motive at the beginning stage, that gives them a feeling of inner fulfillment. It's not that they love humanity. They love this feeling of consolation, inner contentment, which you can't buy in the markets.
So we carry it from life to life, Swami?
Yeah, actually, yes, through these unselfish activities, we accumulate an invisible spiritual treasure. That's why sometimes people, when they are very young, they manifest noble qualities, because they have already accumulated all this in the past. So, in the Gita, in the 6th chapter, there is an interesting dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna. Arjuna is asking this very question. He asks, suppose you meditate, you pray, you read scriptures, you attend retreats, you do your best. But then suppose we die away, we pass out before we get full enlightenment. Or something happens, a kind of deviation from spiritual path. Does it mean that everything will be lost? Ayadi Shraddhayo Pedo Yoga Salida Manasaha Aprapa Yoga Samsiddhim Kam Gadim Krishna Gachami. Question is, what is going to be his or her fate if he or she dies, disappears from this world before getting spiritual enlightenment? The answer is very long, but there is one verse that is directly focused on the topic you referred to. Tatradam buddhi samyogam labhade pauradehikam yadadecha tato bhuya samsiddhu kuridanta. At the end of this 6th chapter, Gita, you find Krishna says, suppose you have done a lot of good deeds, noble deeds, you have accumulated a tremendous spiritual wealth. The person, when you die, when you are born again, and during your next life, whenever you encounter an external condition or a circumstance which may prompt similar spiritual vibrations or tendencies in your mind. Your mind gets connected. So we continue our spiritual efforts from next life again. Of course, in the meantime, Lord Krishna says, you will be born in a family as a result of the good things you have done in this life. You will be born in a family where somehow the conditions will be helpful for you to continue your spiritual effort. So that's why nothing will be wasted. That's why we often find people showing and manifesting strange and striking spiritual characteristics. So that's because of the past karmas and society.
Swami, in Western philosophy, occasionally somebody posits that there has to be something behind the mind for us to recognize anything. But has that thought been developed towards recognizing that that something behind the mind is really the self? I mean, does that come in Western philosophy?
Yes, something. Yes, what is behind the mind is the self. Mind itself gets its mind ability to think and speculate. Whatever functions mind does, it gets that ability from Atman. See, a dead man, his mind is non-functional. Now, what has left him? What's the difference between a dead body and a living human beings? Still human being. What has left him? Sometimes you say, my mind is restless. So you use the possessive case, my mind. Now who is the I there? My mind is restless. My intellect is restless. If you say, well, my body is aching, or you can say, mind is you are referring to mind. Mind tells my body. But so you say, my mind, there should be something behind the mind. And my intellect, so what is that I there? So, of course, I think in Western thought systems like Plato and mostly in the Neoplatonist works, some ideas are explained, but maybe the vocabulary and the language used could be different. And maybe they say the one basic difference is that we don't have a successive, unbroken parampara or succession of teachers dating back from Socrates or Plato, Aristotle, because the succession was broken. In Vedanta, there is always the succession, invisible. Somewhere this successive teaching, this traditional teaching, continue to exist. Maybe due to, most probably at the theological level, Augustine's his obsessive doctrine of this radical sinfulness and total helplessness of man, and perhaps that may have, that's one view of some theologians, that may have altered the course of the original trends in the teachings of Jesus. That's one view. We don't know. I am not an authority in this subject, but that's one view which may not be fully supported, etc. People like Russell, they are agnostics. They take this view. But you always find great spiritual personalities everywhere. Mm-hmm. Even in the so-called primitive, they are not really primitive people. So you find spiritual ideas, spiritual concepts, spiritual being, human personalities. Find everywhere, even in non-religious societies. Spirituality in the broad sense of the term, not in the conventional sense.
This is going to sound like a strange question, but does the Atman want something? Like Ramakrishna says, it's Leela, it's the divine play. Well, or even with with the mother sort of having this bliss for her baby and wanting it to be, and kind of, it's sort of not in a bad way, but kind of a selfish bliss,
Yes.
this satisfaction with the union of her baby. Does the Atman, I hate to use the word want, but want union, want the bliss of union with the Jiva Atman?
Yes, I think this the special approach from Abrahamic point of view, the point of Abrahamic religions, but God creates this world. So first from cause to effect, we think like that. But in Vedanta, we think from effect to cause. So the point is, how do we explain this world? If you explain that Atman wants to create this world, then we don't have much of an admiration for an Atman who creates so many problems in this world. Actually, in fact, many human beings would have made a much better world. There are many human beings with a much better world if given a chance. So why should there be so many disparities, most inexplicable, indescribable contradictions and conflicts in this world? So this Leela aspect is an attempt to explain the indescribable, inexplicable nature of Srishti or creation. We are here trying to explain this world and this life. Now, if Atman had a purpose, if God had a purpose in creating this world, then God could not have been so perfect. If you have a purpose, if you want to do something, then you are in need of something. You have a want. You are in need of something. If you are in need of something, you cannot be the omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent God. So in this case, the indescribable nature, the inexplicable nature, the apparent contradictions, the apparent chaos, all these are explained with one word, this Leela. Now, Leela is sport. Why, you can ask the question, why should God play this sport? We are trying to explain life and this world with the imagery of sport. It's not that God wanted to play volleyball or anything. The point is, in play, you don't have a purpose. When you are a member of the 49ers, you work hard. You have a definite purpose. But if you play football for exercise once a week for half an hour, it is different. You don't have purpose. Sport of Leela itself is an activity without any definite purpose, plan or scheme. So this world, this inexplicable world is explained as a Leela. The Leela is an attempt to explain the effects. It is not an attempt to explain a purpose on the part of the cause, creator.
Okay, well, if you don't mind me having a little...
Yeah, please continue.
You know, what if the purpose of having the world the way it is for us, whether you want to talk about it from the Atman's point of view or for our point of view, what if the whole point was to create union,
Yeah.
which is what the point is. I mean, we know that.
Yes.
Wouldn't this world be the perfect
Yeah.
place with all of its suffering? Because what it does is create world weariness, and then we want to return back. And I'm just thinking of the Abrahamic where it says, you know, God has compassion on us. What more compassion would there be than to finally create this desire in us to return so that we can have this eternal moment of union?
Well, you know, that's why when we really turn to spiritual life in any tradition, even if you don't belong to any religious tradition or you belong to any of the existing world tradition, when we really start praying, meditating, no matter what our tradition is, suddenly you find that these questions are meaningless. These questions arise only before we really start our journey. That's why I explained this phenomenon in spiritual life. in spiritual life, once we really start praying, meditation, any of these spiritual practices, then we leave these questions behind. Because where we suddenly realize that philosophy or epistemology cannot finally give a conclusive answer. At that time only we start praying and meditation. At that moment only we go to library and take a Bible, read New Testament, Gita. Before that we don't really do that. Once we start praying, the first stage is, oh, these questions are really meaningful. When you really start feeling the presence of the divine within, the beginning of life, then suddenly the first experience is we leave these questions behind. Then why do we discuss?
Right.
That's good.
Yes,
I know that.
why
That's
do
why
we
I'm coming to the
discuss?
subject.
Okay.
So, yeah, I know that. That is the glory of Upanishads. Upanishads openly declare, we cannot take you to that absolute reality, God, no. But we can take you away from the wrong path. So, all the scriptures in the world play the role of light. As I said earlier, light doesn't reveal anything. Light only removes darkness. And once darkness is removed, what happens next? It is not a contribution of light. What automatically happens when darkness goes away. So, to begin with, the Upanishads, the Bible or the Gita, whatever may be, all these scriptures want to take your mind away from where it is wandering right now. Right now our mind is worried, bothering about so many other things. What happens in the world, different stock market, things like that. Now, when you start reading any religious scripture, spiritual scripture, suddenly the mind is turned away from those things and it is focused on some ideas related to God, spirituality, spiritual enlightenment, etc. And then you find mind gets slowly focused on this idea. Then we leave the books behind. We reach experience. In fact, one of the glory of Upanishads, and Shankaracharya shouts as a slogan, he says, Srutya, Yuktya, Swanubhutya. 3 slogans, I will explain. Sruti means read the books, the great spiritual classics. Then try to understand, and then meditate, and then bring it in your own life experience. Swanubhuti means one's own inner intuitive experience. That's how we become spiritual.
Right? That doesn't seem to happen in a linear progression, though. It seems to happen in sort of these waves where we get the information, we meditate on it, and then what that happens is we get meaning from that, like deeper meaning, and so we want to go more, and so there's another wave of, book learning.
I shall just give very simple illustration. Now we are gathered, 20-25 people are gathered in this Lake Tahoe. We are discussing things. We are not discussing any worldly topics, anything. We are discussing things that enable our minds and could enable the whole humanity. We are discussing ideas coming from the noblest, the highest, most spiritual mind the world has produced. True. Now what happens, our mind is interacting with these things. When we go back, suddenly we find our mind is equipped with some new thought currents. Now, when this goes on, after some time, suddenly you may perhaps stop attending this retreat. And then what do you know? Instead of that, suddenly you may be reading and you start intense spiritual practices. So, or it may take maybe a few lives or a few years. It depends upon that. So, what you said, linear progression is linear and also it is cyclic, both. It's linear in one sense because it takes you vertically to higher and higher levels. But if it doesn't end in this life, we continue the journey next life. So it is cyclic. So that's the greatness. In fact, that's a very interesting statement in Vedanta. Vedanta makes a very interesting statement. It says, this book doesn't contain the ultimate truth, because ultimate truth is your own experience. But this book can help you to reach there, because when you read this book, you will be reading other gibberish, worthless books. When we discuss these subjects, you will be discussing other disturbing thoughts. Our mind, our intellect, our thought currents get purified by discussing, by doing that. So the Upanishad says, this book is not the end of everything. Whatever this book expounds should become your experience. That's the real end of the spiritual journey. So that's why, but then we always need to remember, our intellect can trap us into thinking that we can intellectually completely analyze and understand this. So what we must do, in fact, there is a dialogue, I won't get time, very long dialogue between Gargi and Yajnavalkya. Sixth Brahmana in the Vedantic Upanishad, you can see that. Long dialogue. And there Yajnavalkya tells Gargi, Gargi is a great philosopher, see, Yajnavalkya tells her, look here Gargi, now your intellect has reached limit. You must stop. We go beyond that, you should reach the experience level. The language is put differently. But Yajnavalkya says, very interesting. Beyond this is not the realm of intellect or philosophization, it's the level of experience. All sincere attempts to intellectually understand things have led to higher experiences. All sincere attempts. That's the idea. One more question perhaps. We shall conclude. So we'll continue the discussion tomorrow. So thank you. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tatsat Sri Rama Krishna Paramastu.